There is nothing wrong with your radio.
Do not attempt to adjust the volume.
We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
All right, welcome here to Media Mothership here on Edge Radio 99.3 FM.
What made Half-Life Alex...
Okay, yep. There we go. Yes, all right. So as always, we're using the wonderful technology from Edge Radio Studios here at Nepaluna, Hobart, Tasmania. And I'm your host, Craig. On this show, we explore how media can shape our understanding of the world around us. Last week, we took a deep dive into various parts of pop culture, including some Andor Star Wars stuff and a little bit of discussion of anime, as well as some news and current pop culture topics. Today's topic, we're going to do a huge deep dive into horror and radio. I came across some really fascinating discussion from Stephen King in his book, Dance Macabre, talking about the impact of radio effectively conveying horror. So we're going to listen to a classic, short, 7-minute horror drama called Chicken Heart. Chicken Heart, the most unlikely of things that could drive horror into the heart of a listener. So we're going to listen to that. Some people might also know of Chicken Heart from the fantastic, though now problematic, Bill Cosby sketch that he did in one of his early live stand-up albums. We'll unpack all of that and a whole bunch of other stuff on Media Mothership today. But the main question is, this idea of how a 7-minute radio drama from 1937 can still, I reckon, haunt pop culture today. I reckon there's some lessons and some interesting political reverberations that Chicken Heart echoes with today's politics, particularly the news we're hearing out of California and the kind of Trump military police crackdown that's going on there. I think this Chicken Heart is in conversation with even scary politics like that today. So keep listening to Media Mothership with myself, Craig, here on Edge Radio 99.3 FM. Of course, if you do have any comments while we're doing today's show, you can SMS us directly in the studio on 04888 11707, or reach out to us via the live stream on YouTube and Twitch. Okay, welcome back now. Musical accompaniment, the thumb organ, Chicken Hearts. So I guess to set up this idea of how a 7-minute radio drama from way back in 1937 still packs a punch, or does it? We'll look a little bit about the history first of it, why this kind of matters. So Chicken Heart, broadcast 1937. It's written by one of the big names in radio dramas, particular horror, Arch Oboler. And he wrote for the radio drama series, mainly Lights Out. We'll listen to the Bill Cosby sketch, which kind of amps up the experience of watching, of listening to radio dramas like Lights Out. Briefly, before we dive into listening to it, the story of Chicken Heart is basically a scientific experiment which goes horribly wrong. You know, it starts with this idea of a chicken heart, and then as we'll hear, things escalate into this crazy panic. To put it in a little bit of context, I guess you got to understand that at the time this was written in the 1930s, you've got this really cool, fascinating glimpse into some of the, I reckon, the key anxieties that were echoing or that were occurring in that time in the late 30s. Think about it. I mean, here we are pretty much in the golden age of radio in the 30s. Television has certainly not made an impact, right? You're really needing to turn to the 50s and 60s. 1930s was still dominated by radio. Radio was the form of popular entertainment and communication. And a series like Lights Out, when this is one of the early episodes from it, is part of what was making radio drama something so exciting for people to listen into. Now, importantly, some of you guys might have heard of the classic media panic radio drama that was Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. That was the one, of course, that led to a huge panic around the power of media and radio to, again, shape the way people perceived reality around them. War of the Worlds, based on H.G. Wells' classic novel, was broadcast in radio form by Orson Welles and done in such a manner that people thought the live broadcast that was occurring was actually happening. And again, it did that by echoing some of the broadcasts that were happening at that point from the Blitz that was occurring on England during World War II from the German air bombings, and evoking that sense of disaster, the Hindenburg disaster, which was broadcast on radio. So again, this Chicken Heart occurs 1 year. So it's broadcast 1 year before War of the Worlds. But I think it sets up the same type of media panic, and certainly Bill Cosby's comedy sketch about his experience listening to Chicken Heart is all about the media panic he experienced listening to Chicken Heart. So we'll play a little bit of that Bill Cosby thing as well as the Stephen King analysis of Chicken Heart shortly. But before we go any further, the other thing to listen out for, I guess, is this idea that in the 1930s, you've got to see this moment of kind of science and medicine that's going through incredibly rapid advancements. We've only had flight occurring, in the 1913 era. So the 1930s is only 20 years after flight. You've got the expansion of a number of technologies, including radio itself. So Chicken Heart is kind of in conversation with some of these fears and kind of technological determinism that is taking up around science at the moment, the kind of hubris of science. And 37, I mean, while World War II hasn't occurred yet, that won't be until 1939 and Germany's invasion of Poland. Nevertheless, you've still got I think the Marco Polo incidents occurred with Japan and China, launching that conflict between Japan going through into China. So we're really at the brink of World War II during this time. I mean, there's a lot of stress that's occurring here. I mean, Hitler's in power. Hitler's starting to gobble up little spots. I'm not sure if Czechoslovakia or Sudetenland has fallen into Germany yet, but it's right around that period. You've got Chamberlain, you've got appeasement occurring. We're at the brink of war, right? It's certainly gearing up. So I think this theme that we'll hear about in Chicken Heart of an unstoppable destructive force is certainly, I think, in conversation with that point in history. So a little bit of media-induced panic. So as you're listening to this, think about, if you turn the lights out, literally the name of the horror serial this is broadcast in is Lights Out. So turn those lights out. Listen to this episode. Think about whether it could induce a bit of panic. What's also interesting about the final point about Chicken Heart before we listen to it is, as we'll unpack, the fact that you've got some really memorable comedy interpretations. Bill Cosby's famous retelling, as well as it being in Stephen King's book Dance Macabre, which is his analysis of horror as a genre, what makes horror work. And he talks specifically about Chicken Heart. So let's give a listen now to the 1937 Chicken Heart. This has been remastered. Again, it's a classic from radio horror and created by Arch Oboler, one of the big masters of terror that we'll listen to. So here is Chicken Heart. We'll play the whole thing. It only goes for 7 minutes, 40 seconds. So sit back, enjoy, grab a coffee or a tea, and listen to Chicken Heart.
Do you remember some time ago in an Eastern scientific institution, they kept a piece of heart alive for weeks on end? Well, I got to thinking, what if that heart began to grow? And grow, and grow, and grow?
Hello? Hello, operator. Give me Mr. Regan, fast. Hello, Mr. Regan, this is Lewis. Listen, get me a rewrite, man. The thing's still growing. No, Chief, I tell you the truth. The corridor's choked with living, crawling flesh. No, I'm not drunk. I'm telling you the truth. That little piece of flesh has grown until now it's jamming that building. All inside the space of an hour. You've got to believe me. It's the greatest news story of the generation, and here you argue with me. I tell you it's the truth. You've got to believe me.
You must believe me. I tell you the only hope is to burn the building to the ground at once.
Now, wait a minute, Doc. Wait a minute. Take it easy.
I tell you, burn it to the ground. Burn.
And I tell you, take it easy. I sent in a call.
Oh, don't you understand? For some reason, I cannot even imagine. This tissue is doubling in size every hour. Do you know what that means? In another hour, it will be twice the size it is now, and long before that, it will break open the building with the force of its pressure, and then it will be free in the street. Do you hear me? Free in the street. And then those tentacles of protoplasm stretching out to feed on anything they can reach. What's happening? The building! See the walls! Cracking! I warned you! I warned you! I tried to warn them. But now it is too late. The heart is free.
Gentlemen, come to order, please. Gentlemen, please. Quiet, please. Please, now, as mayor, no one realizes more than I do the necessity of immediate action in curbing this unspeakable, unbelievable emergency. And I assure you that
Cut the speeches, Mac. That blasted thing is spreading like a forest fire. Call the governor. Get the National Guard out.
Now, wait, please, wait. Here is Dr. Alberts of the Research Institute. Let him speak. Step up here, Doctor.
Got to do something. Let's see what he suggests.
Gentlemen, it was in my institute this horror began. And if you give me a chance, perhaps I can stop it.
What is it, Doctor? Tell us first what that monster really is.
Yes, I will tell you. That great, ever-growing mass of flesh, it is, or it was, a chicken heart.
Chicken heart? Are you crazy, man?
Chicken heart?
Yes, chicken heart, I tell you. Chicken heart. Listen to me, you fools. Listen.
Somebody up there knows what he's talking about.
I tell you that mass of flesh was a chicken heart, the tissue of which, for some reason, is undergoing constant, rapid, accelerating growth. With every passing hour, its growth is doubling. Do you know what that means? If it is now 1 block in size, within 30 hours, that cannibal flesh will have increased in size to 1 square block to the 30th power. In 30 hours, every inch of this whole city will be crushed under that moving flesh. Within 60 hours, it will have covered the entire state. Within 2 weeks, the entire United States. You ask for the National Guard. I say call out the entire army. Blast this thing off the earth.
All ready, Chief? Pumpers are ready, all the hoses coupled up. We'll flood that thing with water from all angles.
All right, here's the signal. Open them up! Full blast!
Chief, look out!
That flesh, it's reaching out! Get back, everybody! Everybody back!
The fools, what good is water? I told them. The only hope is artillery. Bombs.
All National Guardsmen report to your armories. All National Guardsmen report to your armories. General mobilization order.
Battery in position, sir.
Commence firing on the hour.
Yes, sir.
10, 5, 0. Commence firing! Fire!
Useless. It has grown too large, and it grows too quickly. The flesh is already engulfing the guns. They came too late.
You all right now, Dr. Alberts?
Yes. Yes, I'm all right, Mr. Lewis. I'm all right.
Well, I sure am glad I located you. I stalled as long as I could, another 10 minutes, and we couldn't have taken off. That blasted protoplasm, or whatever it is, was sucking at the wheels by the time we left the ground.
Yes. Yes, I saw.
5,000 feet. Well, we'll cruise around up here for a few minutes and then head west.
It will do no good.
You can't mean it. It must stop growing sometime. It must.
Look at it down there. A gray blanket of evil covering everything. See how the roads are black with men and women and their children running for their lives. See how the protoplasmic gray reaches out and engulfs them. See
Stop it! Stop talking like that. We'll get away. The government, they'll send bombing planes, poison gas.
No hope. Listen to me, Lewis. You remember only a handful of days ago, you asked me my prophecy of the end of the earth? You remember my answer? Oh, such a scholarly prophecy. Cessation of earth rotation. Mighty-sounding astronomical theories. But now, this is reality, Lewis. The end has come for humanity. Not in the red of atomic fusion. Not in the glory of interstellar combustion. Not in the peace of white, cold silence. But with that creeping, grasping flesh below us. It is a joke, hey, Lewis? A great joke. The joke of the cosmos. The end of mankind.
Why?
Because of a chicken's heart.
No, we won't die. I can't die. I'll find a safe landing somewhere. I'll find a place. The motor, it's cut out. We're in a spin. I can't get out of it.
I told you, doomed.
No!
All mankind, doomed.
No! We're falling right into it, into the heart.
All right, there we have it. The Chicken Heart, one of the classic all-time horror radio dramas. Let's break this down first in terms of Blake Snyder's Save the Cat theory of script writing. We've looked at Blake Snyder before. He has proposed a number of ways in which if you want to write a great movie, there's a specific number of story beats you've got to make sure you tick off. Let's see if breaking down Chicken Heart aligns strongly and reveals this kind of classic story building structure that Save the Cat is built around. So Snyder starts with the idea that you've got to start strongly with a good opening image. You've got to establish the world through that. So the radio drama, Chicken Heart, starts with the scientist talking about, remember when they were able to create a heart? So establishing the idea of science being able to create amazing things. And this idea of hubris, right? That we're setting up this environment, this world where humans are masters over nature. They're able to create anything they want, including a heart. So that's the establishing image, the first scene. Then we quickly go to the reporter setting up the theme, which is the reporter's calling back to his office with a panic tone saying, oh my God, it's about to explode, right? The building that the heart was in, as the heart's been growing, it's going to burst the walls. And we have the scientists trying to warn everyone that this thing is just going to keep growing. So that's kind of setting up this theme of scientific ambition and panic around the consequences if they become uncontrollable. So that's pretty much immediately the second scene we see. That nicely, as Snyder's saying, establishing the theme. Panic, scientific hubris, unchecked experiment. And then we have this setup as the heart's growing, we're becoming aware of it. The fourth story beat that Snyder talks about is an inciting incident. And it's around, I guess, the walls have broken from the building that contained the heart. So I'd say that's probably the scene that's the inciting incident, the fact that this heart is now growing uncontrollably. That's the catalyst that then sets up the rest of the story, which is how are we going to stop this heart growing, right? What's going on? They're now realizing that this scientific experiment is spiraling out of control. So we have scene 5, or story beat 5, which is the debate. Can it be stopped? So we have this classic scene where scientists, the mayor's there, and they're all struggling to figure out how they're going to fix this. They're debating possible solutions. So we break now into Act 2. This is storytelling point 6, which is the point of no return. Right, so at this point, the heart has continued to escape containment. We have the great scene where the local authorities are trying to use water. Right, they've got the hoses out and they're just trying to hose it down, and it's not working. Right, so there's a sense of dread that's creeping in, that the world now is in full crisis mode. Water's not worked. The scientist has said, I told the fools water wouldn't work. They've got to use artillery and bombs. All right, so then we move into storytelling beat 7, which is fun and games, as the horror escalates. You've got the great scenes of, artillery being called in, the bombs being directed, the military's involved, all these escalating panic moments as their futalism. They're not able to destroy the heart with any of the fun and games that Snyder refers to as this story beat. As we see a series of kind of core horror spectacles being described to us in the radio drama. There's no real sense of, there's a kind of a false hope, right? So the false hope would be that scene near the end where the scientist is on the airplane, right? We have that scene where his assistant or helper has managed to get the airplane off the ground. The scientist that was involved in the research has made it onto that airplane, and it's a kind of midpoint false hope moment where it looks like they might be able to get out of it, right? So the pilot's saying, we'll just circle around a bit, we'll try to figure out what to do next. But that effort is all in fail because we're at story beat 9, which is the bad guys close in, right? This chicken heart, the bad guy, the villain, the force of nature has continued to expand. The scientist in the airplane is just saying it's all hopeless. Destruction's inevitable. Story beat 10, all is lost, right? There's a final realization, right? The pilot's refusing to acknowledge it, saying, no, I can't die now. This can't happen. But all's lost. And we're now into a full dystopic, pessimistic story with story beat 11, Dark Night of the Soul. So the scientist and the pilot in the airplane now confront their powerlessness, right? And the scientist kind of reflects on his own hubris, and we reach this wonderful kind of finale, right, where the growth of the heart's been recognized as impossible to stop. This kind of ultimate horror is being seen below them. He's talking about the gray heart, the little black dots of people trying to escape. We have the finale where this heart is consuming everything, and that theme of that we established in scene 1, where the reporter's calling his base, and the scientist saying, those fools, they've got to listen to me, that these unchecked forces are now beyond human control, with a wonderful final image which is a sound effect image, of course, for radio, of the splat, of the airplane losing its engine, right, and spiraling out of control, and this wonderful final sound of the splat as the airplane crashes into the heart. So it's certainly a really strong story in terms of breaking it down in those 14 Save the Cat story beats. In terms of where Snyder would place this as a genre, as you know, he defines genres in terms of specifically memorable thoughts. So it's not a horror genre. He would say this is a monster in the house subgenre, right, where you have this unstoppable force, right, the monster in the house, which is just wreaking havoc, in this case due to human error, right, the scientist's hubris. And it's got that classic structure that follows the kind of escalating tension and inevitable doom story. So it's considered a classic of being able to map that out. It's a wonderful kind of inevitable doom. 7.5 minutes, packs in a lot. And again, Bill Cosby's little comedy routine on his experience as a child listening to this drives that home. But before we get to Bill Cosby, let's listen to how Stephen King, the well-known horror author, explains why he thinks Chicken Heart matters and is really important to listen to even to it now. So this is in Stephen King's Danse Macabre book, which is his writing about why horror works, how it works in movies, how it works in literature. And what we're going to be hearing about is a little snippet from the audio book narrated by William Durfus. So we'll listen to hear Stephen King talking about the importance of radio horror, and in particular, the author of it, Arch Oboler's Chicken Heart.
3. We're almost done with our brief discussion of radio now. I think that to do much more would be to risk droning along like one of those tiresome cinema buffs who want to spend the night telling you how Charlie Chaplin was the greatest screen actor who ever lived, or that the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns stand at the apex of the existential absurdist movement. But no discussion of the phenomenon of radio terror, no matter how brief, would be complete without some mention of the genre's prime auteur, not Orson Welles, but Arch Oboler, the first playwright to have his own national radio series, The Chilling Lights Out. Lights Out was actually broadcast in the 40s, but enough of the programs were rebroadcast in the 50s and even in the 60s for me to feel I can justify their inclusion here. The one I remember most vividly from its rebroadcast on Dimension X was The Chicken Heart That Ate the World. Oboler, like so many people in the horror field, Alfred Hitchcock is another prime example, are extremely alert to the humor implicit in horror, and this alertness was never on better view than in the Chicken Heart story, which made you giggle at its very absurdity even as the goose flesh raced up and down your arms. You remember that only a few days ago you asked me my opinion on how the world would end. The scholarly scientist who has unwittingly perpetrated the horror on an unsuspecting world solemnly tells his young protege as they fly at 5,000 feet in a light plane over the ever-growing Chicken Heart. You remember my answer. Oh, such a scholarly prophecy. Mighty sounding theories about cessation of Earth rotation, entropy. But now this is reality, Lewis. The end has come for humanity, not in the red of atomic fusion, not in the glory of interstellar combustion, not in the peace of white, cold silence, but with that creeping, grasping flesh below us. It is a joke, eh, Lewis? The joke of the cosmos, the end of mankind, because of a chicken heart. No, Lewis gibbers. No, I can't die. I'll find a safe landing place. But then, perfectly on cue, the comforting drone of a plane's engine in the background becomes a coughing stutter. We're in a spin! Lewis screams. The end of all mankind, the doctor proclaims in stentorian tones, and the two of them fall directly into the chicken heart. We hear its steady beat, louder, louder, and then the sickly splash that ends the play. Part of Oboler's real genius was that when Chicken Heart ended, you felt like laughing and throwing up at the same time. Cue the bombers, an old radio bit used to run. Drone of bombers in the background. The mind's eye visualizes a sky black with flying forts. Drop the ice cream into Puget Sound, the voice continues. Whining hydraulic sound of bomb bays opening, a rising whistle followed by a gigantic splash. All right, cue the chocolate syrup, the whipped cream, and drop the maraschino cherries. We hear a great liquid squishing sound as the chocolate syrup goes, then a huge hissing as the whipped cream follows. These sounds are followed by a heavy plop, plop, plop in the background. And, absurd as it may be, the mind responds to these cues. That interior eye actually sees a series of gigantic ice cream sundaes rising out of Puget Sound like strange volcanic cones, each with a maraschino cherry the size of Seattle's Kingdome on top of it. In fact, we see those disgustingly red cocktail cherries raining down, plopping into all that whipped cream and leaving craters nearly the size of Great Tycho. Thank the genius of Stan Freberg. Arch Oboler, a restlessly intelligent man who was also involved in the movies, 5, one of the first films to deal with the survival of mankind after World War III, was Oboler's brainchild, and the legitimate theater utilized two of radio's great strengths. The first, in the mind's innate obedience, its willingness to try to see whatever someone suggests it see, no matter how absurd. The second is the fact that fear and horror are blinding emotions that knock our adult pins from beneath us and leave us groping in the dark like children who cannot find the light switch. Radio is, of course, the blind medium, and only Oboler used it so well or so completely. Of course, our modern ears pick up the necessary conventions of the medium that have been outgrown, mostly due to our growing dependence on the visual in our set of reality, but these were standard practices which audiences of the day had no trouble accepting, like Tourneure's papier-mâché rock wall and cat people. If these conventions seem jarring to listeners of the 80s, as the asides in a Shakespearean play seem jarring to a novice playgoer, then that is our problem, to work out as best we can. One of these conventions is the constant use of narration to move the story. A second is dialogue as description, a technique necessary to radio but one TV and the movies have rendered obsolete. Here, for instance, from The Chicken Heart That Ate the World, is Dr. Alberts discussing the chicken heart itself with Lewis. Read the passage and then ask yourself how true this speech rings to your TV and movie-trained ears. Look at it down there, a great blanket of evil covering everything. See how the roads are black with men and women and their children fleeing for their lives. See how the protoplasmic gray reaches out and engulfs them. On TV, this would be laughed out of court as total corn. It is not hip, as they say. But heard in the darkness, coupled with the drone of the light plane's engine in the background, it works very well indeed. Willingly or unwillingly, the mind conjures up the image Oboler wants, this great jelly-like blob, beating rhythmically, swallowing up the refugees as they run. Ironically, television and the early talkies both depended on the largely auditory conventions of radio until these...
All right, we'll pause it there. So that's Stephen King talking about why Chicken Heart works so well and how we really need to rewire ourselves to think about how radio works as a theater of the mind, how it doesn't draw upon the same types of suspension of disbelief that we've become familiar with through TV and movies, where we want to visualize it, we want to see it, there's pleasure in the watching of it. Here, it's all in the mind's eye. And as King asks us, when we listen to or read that last scene, that final scene of the scientist giving up hope and saying we're all doomed, and looking down at the pulsating, growing, fleshy heart, again, he says, could this work to our TV ears? And his feeling is it's quite laughable. It wouldn't. So let's dive further into that idea of the theater of the mind and how effectively it can work. As King's setting out here, he's saying it's a really significant moment to imagine through your mind's eye the theater of the mind, which radio is able to do by listening to one of the other important cultural effects that Chicken Heart had on pop culture. And this is Bill Cosby's famous 1966 album Wonderfulness, which was part of one of his live comedy acts. And this is his famous discussion of Chicken Heart. Of course, Bill Cosby, famous for, Fat Albert, Cosby Kids and so forth, and equally probably more infamous now for his criminal activities and law cases against him and being found guilty of rape. So one can't unpack that from what we're about to hear. Important to say, of course, a deeply problematic individual. But let's listen to this famous comedy routine he has, which I do think speaks to Stephen King's point around trying to understand how theater of the mind works and how effective Arch Oboler was with Chicken Heart at creating this. So let's listen now to a little bit from the sketch from the 1966 album Wonderfulness by Bill Cosby.
Go ahead, scare me to death. I'm ready. Scare me, man. Come on now. And welcome to Lights Out. Yeah. Go ahead, scare me. I was dumb enough to do whatever the guy said to do on the radio. Turn your lights out. Yeah, all right, yeah. They're out. Go on, scare me to death. I'm ready. Tonight's episode is about a chicken heart. A chicken heart that ate up New York City. Yeah, go chicken heart. Go get him. Eat him up, chicken heart. Scare me to death. I'm ready. The chicken heart was kept alive in a laboratory in a vat. Special solution. Half blood, half sodium salicylate. One day, a careless janitor knocked the vat over. He went to get a rag to clean it up. The chicken heart grew. 6'5" and in search of human blood. The janitor came back, opened the door. The heart ate him up.
What?
Go get him, chicken heart. Go get him. It moved out into the hallway. Rang for the elevator. 4th floor. Ah! Go get him, chicken heart. Go get him. You will. Moved out into the street. Ate up all the cabs. Beep, beep. The Empire State Building. Ate up the Jersey Turnpike. It's in your home state. It's outside of your door. And it's going to eat you up. Oh, I got my Jell-O, start smearing it all over the floor. Get out of here, chicken heart! I set the sofa on fire. You won't come near smoking fire and Jell-O. My father came in the house and what's it? What the hell's the sofa doing on fire? Come in the house, the chicken heart's gonna eat you up. Hurry up. What chicken heart are you talking about? The one on the radio. Tell you the idiot, turn it off. I hadn't thought of that. For 2 years, anybody that passed by our house, my father, whether he knew him or not, would call him in. Hey, come here, I want to show you my dumb kid. Go on, tell him how you burned up a $100 sofa and broke your father's arm to save us from that.
So that's the classic 1966 Bill Cosby routine, Chicken Hearts. Again, I think really putting you in the feeling of listening to that live with a panic that can trigger into one's imagination. And of course, what's interesting here is, Bill Cosby acknowledging again, talking about how Stuart Hall would talk about the reading positions here. You've got the dominant reading position of Chicken Heart, which is it's a really good horror story, right? It has this good escalating horror that's going to it, which interestingly Bill Cosby sets up and in a really kind of fan fiction way actually embellishes and explains how the hearts started to grow, that a janitor accidentally knocked over some chemical, the chemical got into the heart and just caused this unlikely growth of the heart that the scientists had kept alive. So at one level you have the dominant reading, but then you have Bill Cosby, which is kind of doing his own. It's a version of that for comedy effect, talking about if you took it literally, it suddenly becomes insane. It's weird that you would believe this suddenly, so much so that you'd set fire to your sofa to protect yourself. And again, the whole absurdity of listening to the escalating horror that you're only listening to a radio show, yet it seems so real. It seems like it's happening. So much like a year later from this, you'll have Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast, which notoriously led to people arming themselves, getting out of their homes to try to defend their communities. That were seeing this as real. Equally here, for comedy effect, Bill Cosby's comic retelling of it being that kind of, it's looking at it on paper, as Stephen King says, it's kind of laughable. How can this chicken heart be so terrifying? That is absurd. Yet it is this masterful, I think, combination of comic horror and kind of over identifying with the fear. As Žižek, the philosopher, will talk about this kind of humor that occurs with extreme fear. Where the terror is so ratcheted up that it gets to a point of absurdity, which, is, I think, the heart of Bill Cosby's comedy routine there. And also, obviously some listeners have registered that. Thanks, Anna, for SMSing in. I'm glad it was fun to listen to that on the way home in the car. Because, I think it does hold up. 1937, this broadcast was first made, but it's such an effective bit of horror that it's worthy of unpacking it. And also looking at the cultural impact it's had. Stephen King, fantastic, one of the best horror authors, as well as Bill Cosby, turning it both into a bit of cultural touchstone to discuss. Bill Cosby's 1966 comedy routine and Dance Macabre, what came out in the early 80s. So there you're looking at 20-year periods where this cultural touchstone of the 1937 radio drama still gets discussed and talked about. The other thing that's so interesting, I think, about the chicken heart is this idea of, the absurd logic of it, that the system that you see that's occurring around the chicken heart, the science system, the military system, the police system, the journalism system, all it does is kind of reinforces what they're trying to stop, right? So they're all trying to stop the growth of the chicken heart. And again, this is what Žižek says is so powerful about horror stories, that often they're these tales of trying to stop the threats, and particularly where the story is, the dark tea time of the soul, the kind of, and we lose. It's about the system itself being broken, that the system itself is trying to stop the threat, but the more it tries to stop the threat, the worse the threat gets. It's bringing more amplification to the threat. And this is Žižek's theory of how he sees some abuses of power occurring, some kind of logics of ideology that are growing exponentially and out of control, that the system might have begun with good intentions, but as it's released some destructive force, the more that the system tries to stop that destruction, it itself amplifies it. So again, interesting kind of resonances, I think, with Trump's response to California today, right? How is it that the system, claims of trying to stop violence, yet still escalate violence, right? So this logic, this paradox between just like the chicken heart, the expanding organism, which is paradoxically being accelerated by its growth as more bombing is occurring, more attempts to destroy it is happening. So there's some really interesting philosophical questions that are occurring there, as well as Stephen King's pointing out, a really masterclass in how to create a story in 7.5 minutes that is about the escalation of horror, the escalation of terror, that works so effectively in radio. So it's worth, if you've got a bit of time, going back, listening to Lights Out, a great 1930s, 40s radio serial drama. We've talked about other great moments in horror radio dramas, like The Thing on the Floorboard, which is more of a psychological horror. Chicken Heart is pretty much a fantastic example of more of your minimalist horror, where the sound effects do all the heavy lifting for the panic, whereas The Thing on the Floorboard, which is considered to be another great horror radio drama, really escalates that through this eerie narration as the characters interact. Listen back to our episode on The Thing on the Floorboard for more discussion on that. But yeah, we'll dip into some more radio drama and piece together why it still matters in future shows. Again, I hope you thought The Chicken Heart was a nice bit of timeless horror. And in particular, listen back to it, think of how sound-based fear works, and if it's still effective today as it was in 1937. Turn those lights out and listen to it, and see if a true experience of horror isn't just about monsters, but maybe about our inability to control the unknown. So that's Media Mothership for another week. We'll be taking a break next week as I do a little bit of field research up in Launceston to bring some new interesting stories to the airwaves in a fortnight's time. So no show next Thursday, the 19th of June. Thanks everyone for listening to Media Mothership on Edge Radio. You can listen back to other audio notes for the show on your podcast supplier of choice, as well as catch visuals of the show on YouTube and Twitch. Keep listening now to some really cool Edge Radio tunes.